Oscar Wilde was born and grew up in Dublin, the son of an influential Anglo-Irish family. His father was a famous doctor, and his mother was a translator and a nationalist poet. After graduating in classical studies at Trinity College, Dublin, Wilde went to Magdalene College, Oxford, where he became familiar with the aesthetic work of Walter Pater and John Ruskin. He settled in London and became a popular and eccentric dandy. He became a spokesman for the School of Art for Art's sake. In 1882, he gave a lecture tour in America, famously saying on his arrival, "I have nothing to declare but my genius." He then spent several months in Paris, where he met Mallarmé, Verlaine, Hugo, Zola, and Balzac. In 1884, he married Constance Lloyd, with whom he had 2 children. In the spring of 1895, Wilde's popularity declined sharply when he was arrested and imprisoned for homosexual offenses. After his release in 1897, Wilde emigrated to France, where he lived in poverty and obscurity, under an assumed name. The most important masterpiece is the picture of Dorian Gray, from which was created a film too. The history is settled during the Victorian era, 1837–1901, characterized by a bourgeois mentality. It talks about a boy of an extraordinary beauty, who is blonde and with blue eyes. The story begins inside Olwer's studio. A famous painter, who is kidnapped by Dorian's beauty and decides of painting him for fixing his beauty. Together with him, there is Lord Henry Wotton, with whom Dorian speaks over aestheticism. By starting to see beauty as the most important thing, he became jealous of his portrait because it's young and perfect, and makes a deal with evil to make sure he's left always young and beautiful, and the portrait elders at his place. Dorian uses to go to the theaters, and inside there he met a young actress, Sybil Vane. Between the two started an irritated love story, ending with Sybil's suicide. After Sybil's suicide, Dorian hid the portrait inside the attic, but he often came back to see how it was getting older and older. One day he stabbed the paint, and while Dorian fell on the floor wrinkled and old, the portrait got back to its original beauty. In the 2009 literary film adaptation, the film is considered a fantasy thriller and does not always follow the original plot, which is clear from the very beginning. Actually, the movie starts with Dorian's arrival in London to inherit an estate from his grandfather. Once in London, the artist Basil Hallward, fascinated by Dorian's youth and beauty, decides to paint a full-length portrait of him. When it is finished, Dorian becomes fully conscious of his own beauty and is afraid of losing it. At this point, under the influence of the amoral aesthete, Lord Henry Wotton, who believes youth and beauty to be the supreme values, Dorian expresses the wish that the portrait would have saw all the signs of age, experience and vice, while he will remain in his youthful perfection. Dorian and Lord Henry become close friends, and he begins to go to the theatre, where he meets the brilliant actress Sybil Vane, who falls in love with him. In a short time, he cruelly rejects her, and Sybil commits suicide. In the film, differently from the novel, she drowns herself being pregnant, and her brother Jim, who does not appear in the novel, tries to take revenge on Dorian, trying to kill him. Encouraged by the corrupting influence of Lord Henry, Dorian leads a life of vice, letting his portrait bear the weight of his corrupting soul. Years later, he lets the painter see his horrible face in the portrait. And to keep his secret, Dorian kills Basil. Dorian and Henry want to leave London together, but Lord Henry discovers the concealed portrait and finds Basil's stained scarf in a box. Therefore, Dorian reveals his crime, and he tries to strangle Lord Henry, who, throwing a lit lamp at the portrait, causes it to catch fire. Later, Lord Henry drags his daughter out of the house, while Dorian assures her that he loves her. Only at this point, Dorian stabs his portrait to destroy it and begin a new life. But in destroying it, he kills himself and turns into a hideous old man, while in the movie, he dies due to an explosion. In the end, the portrait is restored to its beauty. But in the movie, Lord Henry sees the portrait's eyes glow, suggesting that Dorian's soul may still be within the portrait.